The Grand Army of the Republic's Venator, and to a lesser extent Acclamator, have become fan favorites ever since their introduction in the prequel trilogy, arguably to the point of one of them, not going to say which, becoming possibly massively overrated. But in today's video, we're going to talk about some obscure, even more powerful ship types in the Republic Navy during the Clone Wars, which you probably haven't heard of, and which were based on these earlier designs. Like so many things in Star Wars, the ships we're going to talk about today were primarily introduced by RPG sourcebooks.
Why is it, when something happens, it is always you three?
So first, let's talk about the ships with the least information known, follow-ups to the Acclamator class. Acclamators were secretly built by Rothana Heavy Engineering, a subsidiary of Kuat Drive Yards in the years leading up to the Clone Wars, having been ordered by the Kaminoans as a way to ferry their troops around the galaxy. Throughout the war, they also did come in other, more directly combat-focused varieties. But if we turn to the place where the most important Star Wars lore is revealed, page 234 of the Star Wars Role-Playing Games Revised Core Rulebook, we get an interesting bit of extra information. Quote, "The success of the vessel in the early days of the Clone Wars prompted the Republic to order 1,000 more from RHE, which by that time had begun designing bigger and better variations along the lines of battleships and destroyers. It makes sense that a company like RHE would be involved in producing multiple types of ships for the war effort, instead of everything being just Venators and Acclamators with some Victory class and Imperator class Star Destroyers thrown in. But this is unfortunately the only place where we have explicit mentions of these larger variations of Rothana ships. This also means we never get official depictions of the ships, but fan projects have taken inspiration from this line and tried to show what these kinds of ships might have looked like. The ships you're seeing now are Acclamator battleship and destroyer variants, which was designed by Victoria and is the design we use in Empire at War Expanded Fall of the Republic, one of the mods I work on for Star Wars Empire at War. This design keeps the same basic elements of the Acclamator as a through line for other Rothana projects, but of course all of this, beyond the basic fact that the ships exist, is speculative. That's kind of just life with most Star Wars lore, unfortunately. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of ship classes which exist just as offhand mentioned somewhere, and even some of the more prominent ships which get mentioned a few times, like the Corellian Strident in the New Jedi Order series, never received an official design. Though of course in EAWX we do have this design by Valorine Osritzel for that as well. This video is technically not sponsored by EAWX, but I will put the links in the description. That brings us to the next ship we'll be talking about today, the Maelstrom class battlecruiser. This one luckily has a fair amount more known about it, although that still doesn't include an official design. So we're once again digging into the EAWX asset pool. The Maelstrom class was originally introduced in the Living Force campaign supplements for the Wizards of the Coast version of the Star Wars role-playing game, where it was a single instance of a ship serving as the flagship for Master Darius Jet in his campaigns in the Kularan system. It's possible I missed something while trying to read back through in those original campaigns for the information on the ship, but I don't think it specifies it as necessarily being a different class from, say, a Venator. It does mention the Maelstrom as being part of a battle group with 2 battle cruisers, which typically refers to larger ships, but I think it's probably just being used colloquially in this instance. But once another company, Fantasy Flight Games, started creating the Star Wars role-playing game, they picked up on this vessel from the Living Force, and they included a full class breakdown in their book Lead by Example. While we don't have a visual depiction from this, it does get confirmed as having some similar details to the Venator, specifically the characteristic dual command bridge structures, which to me implies an intended connection between the two designs. Lead by Example essentially describes it as a kind of command ship and carrier, calling it the largest ship in the Republic's Navy, although this might have to be taken with a grain of salt. No specific length is given for it, but the same book gives stat blocks for it, the Assertor class Superstar Destroyer, which is around the size of the Executor, and for the Home 1, placing the Home 1 and Assertor both in a size class above for game mechanics. The size of the Home 1 is also kind of its own can of worms. The price and the crew for the Maelstrom are much higher than the Home 1, but they're also much lower than the Assertor, so it's probably somewhere between the Home 1. The lower end of the numbers we get for the Home 1 ends up at about 1,200 meters, and at the high end it sometimes is put around 3,000 meters. Game mechanics like price and size classing should never be taken as the be-all and end-all for lore, but in the absence of an explicit length, this can at least help give some indications of what they had in mind. We went for just north of the Imperial class with our version for AWX, so around 2,200 meters compared to the 1,600 for the Imperial class. Lead by Example describes the Maelstrom as being ideal for planetary bombardments and space station cracking. It has a pretty well-balanced weapon loadout with some lighter lasers to take on any incoming fighters, as well as many heavier turbo laser emplacements, and some physical munitions in the form of proton torpedoes and heavy assault concussion missile launchers. But with all this size and power comes a very hefty price tag, and this was a big part of what made the ship unpopular during the Clone Wars within the Republic. Very few were made, and they were fairly quickly phased out. By the time the Empire rolled around, they started to be either mothballed, stripped for parts, or turned into other kinds of test beds. We are given one example of a ship, the Simoom, which managed to escape this fate and instead ended up in the hands of the Rebel Alliance. That's going to do it for today's quick look at some of the most powerful ships you may not have heard of in the Republic Navy. Special thanks once again to my team over at Empire at War Expanded for letting me use our assets in these kinds of videos, and thank you for watching. If you're interested, you can check out the Empire at War Expanded mods at the links in the description.